youth culture. Another creative director hired to work on the Marrow campaign explained it this way: Marrow is a mirror and a vehicle, a reflection of what is truly driving today's rock youth culture, evolution, and limitless trajectory. The playlist is the beating heart of the community that amplifies the vibrant and diverse perspectives of the music, artists, and fans. Marrow is rock music of today and tomorrow. Marrow, Spotify's new global rock flagship playlist. For a flagship genre playlist, the language curiously echoed the ways that Spotify editors had previously discussed flagship genre list playlists, including Lorem and Pollen. At one point in the press, Spotify's playlist editors called their genre list playlists the, quote, future of playlist curation at Spotify. In press and marketing conversations over the years, Spotify playlist programmers had pitted genre against vibe, suggesting that genre was archaic and rigid, and vibes represented a more inclusive way of thinking. They would often discuss their flagship genre list playlists as groundbreaking curation exercises helping chart a path towards a new progressive future of music. The playlist editors would often refer to them less as playlists and more as listening communities. In the branding around the Gen Z targeted Lorem playlist, it was often evoked as representative of an attitude and sensibility. With the introduction of Marrow, it appeared that rock on Spotify had been Loremified. It was genre through the filter of supposed genrelessness. In a 2020 Music Ally conference discussion, Spotify's playlist editors discussed the history of the so-called genreless playlist on the platform. Quote, "We realized there was a gap where we needed to curate for culture rather than genres," said one of the editors. Genres were expanding and artists are experimenting with them. Lizzie Sabo, the curator of Lorem and other Gen Z-oriented playlists, added, quote, "We realized today that the way people listen is more community-based. Take things like Pollen, Oyster, Lorem. These are listening communities that we've seen on Spotify, off Spotify, on social media. It's driven by culture and it's driven by these communities." This conversation is fascinating. In order for artists to even be considered for placement on so-called genreless playlists, they must submit their tracks through a form available in the Spotify for Artists dashboard. That form, of course, asks artists to tag their tracks with one or more genre categories. The Spotify curators here explained how they would soon be dealing with that conundrum. And they said that they were going to address it, be adding more genre options. And Marrow is not their only attempt to take the genreless playlist concept and map it onto other genres. In 2020, Spotify also unveiled a genreless country playlist, where they said, when they were crafting this playlist, they wanted to make sure the title was more evocative than anything else because we didn't want this to be boxed in as a specific genre. Is it a country playlist? Is it an Americana playlist? It doesn't matter, but this is really obviously a country playlist. They also launched a genreless playlist called Creme, representing the best of Brazil's urbano sound. Quote, one in which the music could be cultivated into genreless plurality with a specific sonic vibe that could merge rhythms from different types of music. Bunch of words. A listening community on Spotify, and in the words of Spotify editors, then and now, really seems to be a way that streaming curators have narrativized what the advertising world has long called an audience segment or a target demographic. A particular group of users with shared consumer behaviors, whether real or imagined. So this case of the Marrow playlist illustrates a strange place that a streaming service like Spotify finds itself when it comes to thinking about how to organize music. Having spent many years now doubling down publicly on a narrative of the virtues of abandoning genre, championing the value of organizing music by mood and vibe instead, all the while also creating new ways of thinking about genre and a tight dependency on the entertainment industry power players who dictate the genre-driven terms of the market. By that I mean the major record labels. So in this book, Mood Machine, I tell the story of how organizing music by moods and vibes with their in-house playlist curators and then via their strategy around personalization, algorithmic music curation became a central part of Spotify's growth across the 2010s. There's one chapter in this book called The Conquest of Chill, where I specifically look at the Chill Vibes playlist as a streaming era phenomenon and try to situate it within the broader history of mood music and how record companies and snake oil salesmen have been trying to show new music technologies using mood since the dawn of the recorded music industry. And I always like to take this opportunity to point out that organizing music by mood is a way to transform it into a new type of media product. It's a way of selling users not just on moods, but on the promise that the very concept of mood stabilization is something within their control. A former Spotify playlist editor in reporting this book told me that the goal of its editorial apparatus, but by that they also mean their mood playlists, is trying to reduce friction and cognitive work that a user has to do when they get to the app. Quote, "You get to the platform, you get what you want." In the late 2010s, Spotify's most popular mood-based meta-commodities, playlists, were ones offering self-regulation to burnt-out millennials working on their laptops. Quote, "If you looked at the biggest playlist, it was things like Mood Booster, Relax and Unwind, and songs to sing in the shower," a former playlist editor told me. Chill had become such a hot topic because of how it spoke to a generation that was anxious and overworked, gaining popularity in the same years as other wellness trends, such as skincare routines and CBD sodas. Similar to how Muzak's core marketing bid had more to do with selling the idea of being able to control workers and shoppers, what gets called functional music today is also more about selling a promise than offering a panacea. And like other functional descriptors of the streaming era, what exactly amounts to chill can be hard to pinpoint. Sometimes it's used as a shorthand for the millennial reimagining of easy listening, a designation used since the 1940s to describe pop radio programming that was soft on the ears. Sometimes chill is used to describe motionless ambient soundscapes claiming to regulate the nervous system, like music one might hear in a spa. Other times, chilled is used as a type of filter, evoking a lighter take on any genre. Chilled dance hits, chilled R&B, chilled reggae. These are all among Spotify's official playlist offerings, alongside collections like Chillin' on a Dirt Road, Lo-Fi Chill, and Calm. A former playlist editor once told me that the reason they all created so many chill playlists was actually very straightforward. Quote, "Chill was successful," the editor said. Quote, "All of the playlist editors wanted to be successful and have their playlists be successful, so everyone made chill playlists. It was less that everyone was being told, make chill playlists, and more like a new genre editor comes in, he sees that chill is successful, he wants to have big playlists, he makes 10 chill playlists." One Spotify-affiliated source told me that internally, no one could agree on what chill meant, that it was so ambiguous, it had, quote, "no definition that is meaningful." Across the board in the 2020s, playlists seem to become less about recommending a type of music and more about recommending a type of listener or a type of aspirational listener that a Spotify user wished to become. Take, for example, some subtitles that particularly seem to be typecasting listeners and offering consumable aesthetics more so than contextualizing music. There was one called Farmer's Market, quote, "POV, fresh produce is in your reusable tote, the flowers are in bloom, and you're sipping on an iced coffee." And another playlist simply called Aesthetic, quote, "for those who prefer curated vibe." Words. Even the Sad Girl playlists could potentially extend this pattern with titles like Sad Girl Shit, quote, "I thought I was healed," or, quote, "Sad Girl Starter Pack," described as sapphic songs that defined your music taste as yearning. These sorts of playlist categories were not particularly surprising given the way in which the whole of internet culture in the 2020s, it seemed, was fixated on nicher and nicher microgenres. Or maybe they were really micro vibes. As culture increasingly became fixated on niche aesthetics, the company absorbed these ideas into its broader automated understandings of mood, vibe, and genre. It was all part of a broader datafication that digitalization and streaming had imposed on music for years. Words are a form of data too. Ultimately, mood, vibe, and genre had all just become different ways of tagging music with descriptive data, different ways of sorting music into buckets that serves the necessary functions of streaming curation, which is to say, the function that genre has always played, marketing. They were all just ways to narrow audience segments and influence the pipelines of programming in hopes that something might make someone hit. Online fandoms built around naming microgenres and aesthetics feel directly connected to the rise of metadata as an organizing standard of algorithmic culture. In the early 2020s post-peak playlist era, Spotify staff responsible for playlists were not only curating tracks, they were also tagging them. Their work involved labeling tracks in order to insert them into the appropriate, strongly seated candidate pools, as employees discussed in Slack messages that I reviewed in my reporting, and thus made them more legible to algorithmic systems. Spotify had an entire team dedicated to defining and harmonizing the relationship between humans, algorithms, and sets. And there are strategists that oversee things like content attributes, set checking, and set watching, components of algorithmic systems that suggest what users might want to hear next. As online music cultures were organizing music by granular descriptors, they were fulfilling a similar role, sorting music so it could be better perceived by algorithmic methods like natural language processing. The pop music philosopher and scholar Robin James, in theorizing why music culture has become entwined with the language of vibes, has argued that in embracing vibes, we've adopted the language that algorithms use to perceive and organize us. She's explained vibes as a way to typecast users not based on identity, but on their actions and their data breadcrumbs. In terms of the trajectory that someone might be on as a user, quote, "We've learned how to interact with algorithms so that they perceive us in ways that we want to be perceived," she said in a 2023 interview. Quote, "You're pre-packaging yourself as a data subject." It took a long time for me to understand why so much startup culture of the late 2010s in music was invested in metadata. But now I often think back to a music business conference presentation I attended in 2022 where the CEO of an AI mood data startup walked attendees through her company's tagging product, where a client could simply upload a track and based on a sonic fingerprint, the AI would tag up the track with niche descriptors from the AI's proprietary taxonomy of genres, moods, and emotions. Clients often uploaded many more than one track though. They were uploading tens of thousands. The product was being used by streaming services to generate playlists and by private equity companies who needed to understand the curatorial possibilities of their new portfolios during the catalog royalty gold rush of the early 2020s, in which investors were paying hundreds of millions of dollars to buy out artists and publishers' royalty rights. Quote, "We're an artificial intelligence company for the music industry," the CEO said, but that's just a fancy way of saying we're a data processing company. This is only one of a few different companies offering a similar product, mood data taxonomy as a service. Tagging was a big business opportunity, and big businesses will always look for free and cheap labor to exploit, including the labor of tagging and sorting. Why process the data if you can get fans to process the data for you? The idea that streaming has ushered in a post-genre landscape has always, firstly for me, raised the question, is genreless curation even possible on a technical level under a system that requires so much metadata to function? Spotify launched its genreless campaign in 2018 with a playlist called Pollen with the tagline, "Genreless, quality first, always." Not only is the post-genre curation effort clearly a branding exercise, an example of rebel capitalist posturing, Spotify's way of positioning itself as more adventurous than the old-school music business, but the very notion that Spotify could banish genre is at odds with the reality that the platform has dizzyingly created more and more of it.